Freezing cat begs man to let her in. He had no idea what was coming. Have you ever opened your door to find someone desperately needing help, only to discover they had a secret that would change your life forever? That's exactly what happened when this man answered a plea on a freezing winter night. The December wind howled outside Marcus's window that evening, rattling the shutters and sending waves of cold through every crack. He'd just settled into his favorite armchair with a steaming mug of hot chocolate when he heard it, a soft, insistent sound that made him pause. Tap, tap. Marcus set down his mug and walked to the front door. Through the frosted glass, he could make out a small silhouette, and when he flicked on the porch light, his breath caught in his throat. A cat sat there, staring directly at him with eyes that seemed to plead for mercy. She wasn't crying or yowling, just sitting with quiet dignity that made her need all the more urgent. As their eyes met, she lifted one delicate paw and placed it gently against the glass, as if knocking politely and asking, "Please, let me in." Marcus had always been a practical man, someone who thought decisions through carefully. But something about this moment, the way the cat held his gaze without wavering, the bitter cold radiating through the door, the trust in that simple gesture, made the choice for him. He turned the lock and opened the door. A blast of Arctic air rushed in, but the cat didn't hesitate. She walked inside with quiet grace, her tail held high despite the ice crystals clinging to her beautiful fur. Marcus quickly shut the door behind her, sealing out the brutal winter night. Now, standing in the warm glow of his hallway, Marcus could really see her. She was absolutely stunning. A gorgeous coat of cream and silver tabby markings, with intelligent green eyes that studied him with equal curiosity. But what surprised him most was how well-groomed she appeared. This wasn't some scraggly stray. Her fur, aside from the melting ice, was thick and lustrous. She looked healthy, round even, almost as if someone had been caring for her. "Where did you come from, beautiful?" Marcus murmured, crouching down to her level. The cat responded with a small, chirping meow and began calmly grooming the ice from her paws, as comfortable as if she'd lived there her entire life. Marcus straightened up, concern flickering through him. Someone must be missing her desperately. On a night like this, someone was probably calling her name into the darkness, hoping she'd come home safe. He'd start searching for her owner first thing in the morning. But right now, his unexpected guest needed warmth and probably food. In the kitchen, Marcus poured milk into a small pan and warmed it gently on the stove, not too hot, just enough to chase away the chill. He found a shallow bowl and filled it, then carried it back to the hallway. The cat was sitting exactly where he'd left her, patient and trusting. She approached the bowl cautiously, gave it a delicate sniff, then began to drink. The soft sound of her lapping filled the quiet house, and Marcus felt something shift inside him. It had been so long since he'd heard another living creature in these rooms. He'd moved into this house 8 months earlier, after years of restless wandering. His 20s had been consumed by military service, structure, discipline, but constant movement. After that came civilian jobs that kept him traveling, living out of suitcases, chasing contracts from city to city. Exciting at first, but eventually exhausting. Somewhere around his 32nd birthday, Marcus realized he was tired of temporary. Tired of hotel rooms and fleeting friendships. He wanted roots, a real home. And most of all, he wanted to finally get the dog he'd dreamed of since childhood. Growing up in a cramped apartment where pets weren't allowed, young Marcus had befriended every dog in the neighborhood, offering to walk them, playing with them at the park. Someday, his mother had promised, when we have more space. But someday never came, And by the time Marcus could make his own choices, his lifestyle had made pet ownership impossible. Now, finally settled with a house of his own, he'd been planning to visit the local shelter. He'd even bookmarked their website and scrolled through photos of hopeful faces. But he kept putting it off, telling himself he needed to finish unpacking first, needed to feel more settled. And yet, here he was, watching a stray cat drink milk in his hallway, and feeling something warm unfold in his chest. When she finished drinking, the cat looked up at him with those remarkable eyes. Then, with purposeful steps, she followed him back to the kitchen, pausing frequently to investigate corners and sniff at baseboards with intense curiosity. Marcus reached down to stroke her soft fur. The purr that erupted from her small body was unexpectedly loud, a rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through his palm. She pressed against his leg, weaving between his ankles affectionately. "You're a friendly one, aren't you?" Marcus said softly, scratching behind her ears. "Don't worry about the cold out there. You can stay here tonight. Stay as long as you need, actually." The words surprised him even as he spoke them, but he meant everyone. He offered her a plate of leftover roasted chicken, but she only sniffed it politely before turning away. Not hungry, apparently. Marcus returned to his living room, to his cooling hot chocolate and the football game on TV, but his attention kept drifting. After a few minutes, he heard a soft meow from the hallway. Marcus found the cat waiting for him, and, to his amusement, she began leading him through the house like a prospective buyer at an open house, investigating every room with thorough attention. In his bedroom, she jumped gracefully onto the bed and began kneading his comforter with her paws, purring thunderously. She leaped onto his reading chair, then up to the windowsill, where she sat perfectly still, watching snowflakes spiral down from the black sky. Marcus stood behind her, seeing his familiar view through new eyes, the way each flake caught the streetlight dancing in the darkness. In the guest bedroom, she let out another plaintive meow in front of the wardrobe doors. Curious, Marcus opened them for her. Without hesitation, she stepped inside and immediately began kneading a folded navy blue blanket on the bottom shelf. Her purring grew even louder, echoing off the wooden interior of the wardrobe. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, watching her work and laughing softly. He had limited experience with cats, but it looked like this one was making herself completely at home. He felt strangely proud that she felt safe enough in his house to let her guard down. A few scratches on a blanket seemed a small price to pay for the companionship that was filling his quiet home. The cat spent the entire evening in Marcus's guest room, peaceful and friendly toward her new host, purring contentedly whenever she saw him. She showed no interest in food, but drank from the water bowl he left for her. After checking on her one last time, watching her curl up contentedly in the wardrobe on her chosen blanket, Marcus headed to bed, feeling less alone than he had in months. The next morning, Marcus woke with a mission. He grabbed his phone and took several clear photos of his beautiful guest, her distinctive markings, her elegant face, those intelligent eyes. Then he began the search for her owner. He walked up and down the street, knocking on neighbors' doors and showing them the photos. Mrs. Peterson, 3 houses down, cooed over the pictures but shook her head. She'd never seen the cat before. The young couple across the street hadn't either. The elderly man with the garden promised to keep an eye out, but didn't recognize her. Marcus checked community bulletin boards, scrolled through missing pet posts online, and searched social media groups dedicated to lost and found animals. Nothing. No description that matched, no frantic posts about a missing cream and silver tabby. He created his own post, carefully describing her and adding the best photos. Found, very friendly cat, cream and silver markings, found during snowstorm. Please contact if she's yours. He added his phone number and waited hopefully. Hours passed. A few people commented, "What a gorgeous cat," and "Hope you find the owner." But no one claimed her. Several people suggested he take her to the animal shelter, where they could scan for a microchip and add her to their found animals database. But Marcus couldn't bring himself to do it. Something about the way she'd looked at him through that glass, the way she'd chosen his door out of all the houses on the street, the way she'd settled into his home like she belonged there. It all felt meaningful, significant. He wasn't ready to send her away. That afternoon, Marcus drove to the pet store, feeling slightly foolish, but also excited. He'd never bought cat supplies before, and the array of options was overwhelming. He chose a litter box, a bag of high-quality cat food, and a plush cat bed that looked comfortable. When he got home and set up the new bed in the guest room, the cat sniffed it cautiously before settling into it immediately, especially after he placed her beloved navy blanket from the wardrobe inside. But she still wouldn't eat. Marcus tried the dry food, then opened a can of aromatic wet food, but she turned away from both. His concern deepened when he petted her and noticed how cold she felt to the touch. Not just cool, genuinely cold, as if her body wasn't generating enough heat. "Are you sick, sweetheart?" he murmured, running his hand gently along her back. She purred loudly in response, but seemed restless, shifting positions frequently, unable to get truly comfortable despite the soft bed. Marcus remembered the harsh cold she'd endured before finding him. Maybe she'd caught something during her time outside in the storm. He brought an electric heating pad, setting it to low, and placing it beneath part of her bed so she could choose whether to lie on it. He added another thick blanket for good measure. She needed the blankets gratefully, her purrs constant, but the restlessness continued. Throughout the evening, Marcus checked on her repeatedly. Each time, she greeted him with that powerful purr, her eyes soft and trusting. He reasoned that if she were in real distress, she'd probably hiss or try to hide. The constant purring was a good sign, he told himself. Maybe she was just adjusting to her new environment, still coming down from the stress of being outside in the cold. But the refusal to eat worried him. He decided to give it one more day. If she still wouldn't eat by tomorrow evening, he'd take her to a veterinarian, regardless of whether he could locate her owner. That night, more snow fell, blanketing everything in fresh white. Marcus made sure the guest room was warm and cozy, adjusting the thermostat higher than he normally kept it. He checked on his feline guest one last time before bed. She was curled in her bed, blankets arranged around her like a protective nest, and she opened her eyes to look at him with what seemed like deep gratitude. "Sleep well, beautiful," Marcus whispered. "Whatever you need, I'm here, I promise." He went to his own bed, feeling oddly protective of this mysterious cat who'd appeared in the storm. The next morning, Marcus woke to an unusual silence. The house felt different somehow, fuller, warmer, more alive than before. He made his coffee in a sleepy daze, then padded down the hallway to check on his guest. He opened the guest room door and stopped dead in his tracks. A soft chorus of tiny mews greeted him, high-pitched, delicate, brand-new voices announcing themselves to the world. His breath caught painfully in his chest as his eyes adjusted to the scene before him. The cat was lying in her bed, looking up at him with exhausted but unmistakable pride. And nestled against her belly, Barely larger than his fist were three impossibly tiny kittens, squirming, mewing, perfect little beings with eyes still sealed shut and miniature paws kneading at their mother's fur as they nursed. "Oh my God," Marcus breathed, his voice cracking with emotion. Everything suddenly clicked into place. She wasn't well fed. She'd been heavily pregnant. That roundness he'd noticed wasn't good health or someone's care. It was new life growing inside her. She hadn't been lost. She'd been desperately searching for somewhere safe, somewhere warm, somewhere she could bring her babies into the world without them freezing in the brutal winter cold. And out of all the houses on that street, she'd chosen his. She'd looked through his window and somehow known that he would help her, that he would keep her safe, that he would protect the precious lives she carried. Marcus sank down onto the floor, careful not to startle them, and just stared in wonder. The kittens were impossibly, heartbreakingly small. One had markings like its mother, cream and silver tabby stripes. Another was pure white, like fresh snow. The third had darker tabby markings. They moved in slow motion, their tiny mouths finding their mother, their small paws pushing against her as they fed. The mother cat, this brave, incredible cat, watched him calmly, still purring that deep, rumbling purr. If Marcus had harbored any doubts about her being a stray, they evaporated in that moment. No pampered house cat would have been wandering outside in a dangerous snowstorm while heavily pregnant and about to give birth. She'd been surviving on her own, probably for weeks, growing heavier and more vulnerable, until desperation and maternal instinct had driven her to seek shelter. And she'd found him. Marcus felt unexpected tears prick at his eyes. Something profound had just happened here, something that transcended the simple act of opening a door on a cold night. This cat had trusted him with not just her own life, but with the lives of these three tiny, helpless beings. She'd chosen him to witness this miracle, to protect her family in their most vulnerable moment. "You brave, brave girl," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You incredible, amazing girl. I've got you now. I've got all of you. You're safe here. I promise you're safe." He spent the rest of that day in a kind of odd daze, checking on them frequently, making sure the room stayed perfectly warm, keeping fresh water available for the exhausted new mother. And suddenly, finally, she ate. She ate ravenously, her body demanding fuel to produce milk for her three hungry babies. Marcus kept her bowl filled, grateful she was taking care of herself at last. A few days later, after the mother cat seemed strong and the kittens were nursing well, Marcus carefully placed the small family into a pet carrier lined with the now precious navy blanket and drove to the nearest veterinary clinic. The vet, a kind woman named Dr. Chen, examined them all with gentle, experienced hands. "They're perfectly healthy," she announced, smiling at Marcus's obvious relief. "Mother cat is probably about 2 years old, and these little ones are doing beautifully. We'll get them scheduled for their first shots in a few weeks when they're old enough." "And her?" Marcus asked, nodding toward the mother cat, who was calmly watching the vet examine her babies. "She's a stray, right? Not someone's lost pet." Dr. Chen checked carefully, running a scanner over the cat. "No microchip, and given her condition when you found her, heavily pregnant, out in that terrible storm, I'd say she's been surviving on her own for quite a while. You saved her life, Marcus, and theirs. If she'd given birth outside in that cold—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew. Marcus drove home with his heart full, the sound of tiny mews accompanying him the whole way. He'd already made his decision, really, the moment he'd seen those 3 perfect kittens. There was absolutely no way he could give them up now. The thought was impossible. They were his family. A month passed with no one claiming the mother cat. Marcus officially registered all 4 cats at the veterinary clinic, listing himself as their owner. Signing that paperwork made it real, made it official. They were his family now, legally and completely. As the kittens grew bigger and their eyes opened, their distinct personalities began to emerge. The one with its mother's cream and silver markings, he named her Luna, was bold and adventurous, always the first to explore new territories and investigate strange sounds. The pure white one, whom he called Ghost, was gentle and affectionate, preferring to curl up in laps over exploration. The darker tabby, Sterling, was the mischievous troublemaker, getting into everything, knocking over cups, and wrestling with anything that moved. Marcus bought toys, feather wands that sent them into pouncing frenzies, jingle balls they batted across the hardwood floors, little toy mice they carried around like precious prey. He bought a tall cat tree that reached nearly to the ceiling, with multiple platforms and a cozy cave at the top. He cat-proofed his entire home, securing loose wires, removing breakable items from low shelves, and accepting that his house would never look quite the same again. The mother cat, whom he'd named Stella after the North Star that had somehow guided her to his door that frozen night, became his constant shadow and companion. She followed him from room to room, sat beside him while he worked at his computer, and slept at the foot of his bed every night. When he came home from work, she was always there to greet him at the door, and the sound of her distinctive purr had become the soundtrack to his daily life. She'd become so much more than a pet. She was his friend, his responsibility, his family. And when she was old enough and strong enough, Marcus had her spayed, ensuring she would never have to face another dangerous pregnancy or risk her life in the cold again. Now, 3 months after that fateful snowy night, Marcus's house had been completely transformed. Where once there had been only silence, there was now the constant patter of tiny paws racing through hallways, the sound of playful growls and mock battles. Where there had been loneliness, there were now warm, furry bodies pressed against him on the couch every evening. Where there had been empty rooms that echoed with his solitary footsteps, there was now life. Exuberant, chaotic, beautiful life. He'd been searching for a home for so long, moving from place to place, trying to find where he belonged. And in opening his door to a desperate, pregnant cat on a freezing winter night, he'd finally found it. Not the house itself. That was just walls and a roof and a mortgage. But home. Real home. The kind that comes from being needed. The kind that comes from taking care of something beyond yourself. The kind that comes from love, even when it arrives unexpectedly on your doorstep in the middle of a snowstorm. As Marcus sat on his couch that evening, Stella curled up beside him, and 3 growing kittens tumbling over each other on the carpet, playing with a feather toy, he thought back to that moment. The soft tapping on the glass, the cat's eyes meeting his through the frost, the decision to open the door. "Thank you," he whispered to Stella, gently scratching behind her ears the way she loved. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for trusting me." She responded with her deep, rumbling purr and pressed her head against his hand. Marcus knew, with absolute certainty, that opening his door that frozen night was the single best decision he'd ever made in his entire life. Have you ever taken in a stray animal and discovered they needed you more than you realized? Has an unexpected act of kindness ever completely changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear how compassion transformed your world. And if this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true tales of the unexpected bonds between humans and animals. Remember, you never know when your next life-changing moment might be waiting just outside your door, asking to be let in.